Happy Friday, all. Tech Bros here. Mary in LA. How you doing, bro?
How's it going, Mary? What's new in Mary's world?
Good, good, good. I ventured out of the house last night, which I don't do often. We had a low-key data happy hour here in LA, the third one. It was at a barber shop, this venue in Culver City, which is part of LA, really. In the front is a barber shop and someone getting his haircut, and then you go through into the back, and it's a place where you have drinks and talk to data people on a Tuesday night. So that was fun. Knew lots of people who knew the tech bros, and had some good conversation about the tech world.
Did
And
you
a
get your
Sorry?
Did you get your hair cut or
I didn't
hairstyle?
know. I just had my hair pulled back today. I did not get it cut. But it was a nice break from I'm working a lot these days and trying to keep up with the Kate-spiracies. I'm not like a royal watcher. I can't stand the royals, but I'm like fascinated by where the heck Kate Middleton might be. So, um, that frankly has been taking up a lot of my week. So what's
Yeah.
up in
Well,
your world?
here's the thing about all this AI hype. If AI was so good, wouldn't AI have found Kate Middleton by now?
Yeah, or wouldn't Kate there be a new Kate as an AI? I mean, maybe she's
Yeah,
gonna
there'd
come
just be a clone or something, right?
back as
Just
a host.
put the body double in.
Yeah, I mean, so far they're all the tech they've used is Photoshop, which was highly disappointing. They can do better. So, um, should we go ahead and bring Nick up?
Yeah, let's bring Nick on. And yeah, for our audience, we've had Nick on the show before about a year ago. I think the last time we chatted with Nick, who's the CEO of Workstream, it was just after it was the day of all the Silicon Valley Bank stuff about a year ago, and we were chatting with Nick as we'd set the like a week or two out, had brought him on scheduled him for the show, and turns out like that day, the whole morning he was running around. New York trying to physically move money out of a bank, do a bank heist.
Echoes of 1929.
Yeah, and now here we are a year later. And yeah, we're going to get into a lot of stuff about, Nick's, running a small startup. Want to have a very candid conversation about, how difficult things have been and like what's going on with pricing, what's going on with the data market, tech companies, like what's hard right now. So, feel free to ask questions as always. And yeah, Nick, you want to give the 1 minute intro to anybody who doesn't know you?
Of course. By the way, thanks, bros, for having me back on. It's always great to chat with you. Yeah, so I'm Nick. I'm the founder of Workstream.io. We're a seed stage startup in the data space, and we can get into it, but we're seed stage, so we've like pivoted around a million different times. We just launched this new incident management product. And I'm happy to share with everyone the journey to how we got here. But yeah, we launched this in the last few months, and we just launched actually free Slack alerting for DBT if you work in data. That actually has been going gangbusters here over the last few weeks, which is just like an amazing culmination of a crazy journey. But yeah, that's me. I live in New York. I've been in tech for the better part of 15 years now, which is crazy.
Yeah, right on. So with Workstream, like, you pivoted a few times, like early on, eventually have landed at where you are now, which is a lot of monitoring, alerting, like, I don't know, workflow management type of a product, if you want to describe it
It's
that
like
way.
pager duty for data, right? Is an analogy.
Yeah, like how what's been difficult about like selling into your ICP, and what's been like hard over the last year since we chatted with you last. Like what have your big lessons been?
Yeah, I mean, so much, right? I think if you look at the tech market in general, and Lauren, we haven't like talked about this directly, but I think you probably would agree that like there's been inflation all over the place, right? Like in tech, we've had like wage inflation. In the economy in general, there's been like crazy like consumer price inflation, but like SaaS inflation is insane. And if you look at like what happened with SaaS pricing over the last 10 years, I think that's true. So for us, we started to go to market last year. This is like as the whole SVB meltdown was happening, right? We started to go to market. We had teams that were signing up and paying us 10, 15, 20 grand for our product. And then things just like flatlined. And so you're kind of looking at that and you're like, well, what's like the root cause behind that, right? Is it the product is wrong? Is it the macroeconomic moment that we're in? Is it our pricing strategy? Where I kind of ended up at is it's actually kind of all of these things. And we need to have like a frank come to Jesus moment with like ourselves about like, is the product a must have or is it a vitamin? And are you claiming more value than you're like providing? And is the way that you're engaging and bringing customers on board like right? And if honestly, like if the answer to one of those things is like wrong, like you've made the wrong decision, I think everything falls apart, right? And so it was like at the highest level, first 6 months of last year, we like made all of this progress. I mean, despite the fact that like we almost died in a bank meltdown. Which is what I was talking about with you on the last time on the show. And then things like stop. So you're first trying to like diagnose what's going on, despite lots of like mixed signals around it, and then assess where you go. And so we've made a lot of decisions and lots of changes, but you know, at the highest level, that's what like the last half of last year was about for us.
Yeah. And you mentioned price inflation, right? Like, I mean, one of the things like that we've seen right now is just, you know, these budgets getting blown up the last couple of years of having, you know, 1,000 SaaS tools and a lot of very highly paid people to string them all together. And a lot of companies are like, well, we actually don't need all these SaaS tools. We don't need, you know, everyone doesn't need their, you know, Me Too product. You know, we've seen the rise of like, I don't know, I call it like blank ops roles, right? Like sales ops, revenue ops, customer service ops, everything ops, developer ops, DevOps, ML ops, like everything has an ops on it. And then you start making these ops teams and then they get more and more, you know, then you've got your management level, then you have like, you know, more and more people getting shoved in. A lot of times just, you know, stringing together a lot of the SaaS. And like, I don't know, I've been beating the drum about this for over a year. Like if you're doing one of these jobs, like keep your resume handy because a lot of companies can't afford it. And, you know, we've kind of seen that play out. But when you talk about pricing and like positioning, which is, you know, one of the things that, you know, we want to get into here, like, how do you differentiate yourself as not just another Me Too product or just another thing? Like, how have you, like, what have you learned about how to, you know, specifically show value and show that we're not just another blah thing out there, you know, in a sea of, you know, Matt Turk's mad landscape or the Chief Martech landscape, which is just 1,000 logos on each? Yeah.
I mean, great question. I mean, obviously great question. Like at the crux of like success, right? I mean, ultimately it's funny talking about like software price inflation and like constrained budgets as the founder and leader of like a software company trying to get people to buy your product, right? Because ultimately like that's what you're trying to do, right? Like if there's like an ulterior motive, I mean, in some ways it bakes down to like, are you going to gate value behind like you got to buy or not, right? And people throw around like tons of like fancy buzzwords about like product-led growth or sales-led growth or like whatever that is, right? But how you show value to clients is completely different if you make them sign a $15,000 to $20,000 contract before they can use your product. And the challenge when you're making that decision as like a founder, right, is like when you're like, okay, like we're going to be product led. We're going to have like a free product that's out there. You can get like wrapped around the axle really, really quickly of like, well, like take a look at, Atlassian, right? Well, like they're incredibly successful, but like in order to do that, they had to drive like the most massive volume ever, right? You just need so many people using your free products that you can have a low price point and then you can like build a business around it, right? But that is ultimately like the best model, because I think in a lot of ways it like simplifies like the incentive structure, right? Like here's something that you should use. If it is valuable, you will continue to use it. If it's not valuable, you're not going to use it, right? You have more sophisticated, complex needs, like over here is something that you could buy, right? I mean, at its most basic, it comes down to that. And where I think I would have felt, well, I'll just be honest, like where I fell victim in some ways to like this fallacy was like, well, is our market actually massive, right? And you almost get too academic around it, right? You're like, well, in order to build a business here, like the average price point has got to be something really, really high, right? And again, this is because like there's all of this pressure on you, especially when you're like a VC-backed business to go build the next $3 billion thing, right? And so you can fall victim to like the fallacy of the price point has to be really, really high, as opposed to just keeping it as simple as possible of like, let's just show people a piss load of value. And when we do that, like the rest is going to come out in the wash in like some way, shape or form. I think with the exact product itself, I mean, every company is different. For us, it's just a matter of like following the customer and what the customer is telling us. And the way we got into incident management is we had some customers that were using this other product. They started looking at the way our incident management features worked. And they were like, we have these needs, please help us over here, right? And so we kind of just followed them over to that value. And now we're kind of living what I'm speaking, and we're going to kind of see where it takes us.
Yeah. What, because you have a free, or had or have a free tier, right? Like, or like a basic opening PLG led.
Yeah. So like our strategy now, which like actually appears to be working, which has been amazing and much needed, right? Is we pivoted to like announcing what we call like our core product. And that's free. So like anyone can go and install it right now. And what folks are eating up about it is that it gives you awesome alerting in Slack for your data incidents. And that takes 10 minutes to go get value out of, right? And there's nothing that else you need to do as a data team beyond that to start getting value. It's like, oh, we're getting detailed and actionable alerts in Slack. That helps us. It helps us off hours. It helps us respond on our phones, whatever it is, right? So that's like the core. And so I think our challenge now is like, we need to make that core product, that free product that anyone can go install, right? Like our flagship, right? Like actually, can you do that, right? Can that be your most important product? Sorry, Mary.
For people who don't know Workstream, that is quite a pivot.
Yeah. Like we were pushing folks on our like team SKU, right? Which was like a sales led motion. You get into like a pilot, you have like a pilot plan, you're quoting people 10 grand, you have to go through procurement, all of this stuff. And there's a lot of reasons why you might go down that path. But having like a free product is like is a very, very different world, or like kettle of fish, right? And everyone wants to like be product led and have a free product, but I think for at least me, we got like wrapped around the axle maybe a little bit on, well, then how does that convert into your business model, as opposed to just being like laser focused on like, hey, we have this free product, and now gives folks like awesome Slack alerting and like the core features that any team is going to need around incident management, and the core features any data team will need around incident management. And then we'll figure out the rest later, and that's a problem for like another day, right? But let's just show folks value. And I think, Lauren, to your point about like inflation in general in the tech economy, or like in the economy in general, if you just look at what's happened at on a macroeconomic financial basis, right? Capital is a lot more expensive, which obviously means people's budgets are constrained, which means that like extraneous roles are killed, extraneous software is killed. But in general, like every piece of software is worth 10% of what it was worth 2 years ago. And that includes every piece of software. Like I've talked to companies that are killing Zoom. Like they're like, we don't need Zoom. We have Google Meet for free. So why would we pay for Zoom, right? Mm-hmm. So if like you're talking to somebody that's killing Zoom out of their budget and they're a remote first company, like pull up your britches. It's like big boy time.
Yeah, Zoom's one of the ones that, I follow them pretty closely just as a business, and they're a publicly traded company, and they're not, they had their pandemic high, and, we'll see where they end up landing, because I mean, there's, anyone using Microsoft is already paid into the Microsoft ecosystem. They can use that. Everyone, if they're not into that and they have the Google ecosystem, they have Google Meet, which is fine. There's also other, it's very commodity space. There's other stuff out there. So Zoom's an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's arguably like those competitor tools. It's like honestly a bit monopolistic, anti-competitive to an extent. Now this is going to take us like in a totally random like direction, right? But like, is that fair that like Microsoft and Google just to like offer a product for offer a product for free? Is that like anti-competitive? Is that price gouging or whatever it is? And it's not as simple an argument as like Standard Oil type of price gouging, because just the dynamics in tech are so different. But I think your point is like, why the hell are you going to buy Zoom if you get this other stuff for free,
Right. The thing with PLG, like, I mean, there's a lot of PLG people out there who have kind of had to, come back from it. And like an example is like, there's a venture capital firm that was like beating the drum about this for a long time. This Boston-based firm called, what are they called? OpenView.
It's OpenView,
yeah. Yeah. And then, they were, writing the blogs about this and leading it forward. And, now they're kind of, winding down, right? And like, they still have their investments and stuff, but they're not making new investments. And, they were the PLG people for a while. And now it's kind of going away. Like, I guess in the same way that like, how much of PLG or like this free to paid is just a VC subsidy? And what I mean by that for folks out there is like, a couple of years ago before Uber was public, Uber had raised so much money that like, Uber and Lyft were undercutting each other, and you could get a ride for pretty cheap in most places.
You get
and
paid.
They both go public, and now they're accountable to Wall Street numbers, and there's not as much of a subsidy, so the cost of the ride goes up. I'm in New York, like I live near Columbia, which is uptown. I want to go to like, I don't know, Times Square. Not that I would want to go there because no New Yorkers ever go there. But if I want to go to Times Square, it's like $40, in an Uber, or I could just get there in 20 minutes on the subway. And so like, how much of PLG in general is just the subsidy that keeps getting passed forward, or what do you think about that?
I mean, that's an awesome question. I think, a couple of things that come to mind when you say that. I think that's an important question for me to answer. I think a question for like a consumer is like, should they care, right? Because if the VCs are subsidizing the freemium thing, or like the Lyft analogy, right? Like, isn't the benefit passed to like the buyer or the consumer in that world, right? Like, I want to go back to the days where Uber was awesome in New York. Like, I hate Uber now in New York. Like, I churned off of Uber because it was so expensive, and honestly, like, there was no drivers. Like, the experience became crap. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to like drop like
you can
F-bombs and
say
stuff
crap,
on the show.
fuck, shit, whatever on
Great.
the show.
No, the audio captioning usually stars it. It's amazing technology.
Amazing. So anyways, it's like literally the Uber experience now is shit. Like I was at dinner last night with my wife and she was calling Uber. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, let's just go outside and get a cab, right? I feel like I'm in 1995 again. But like the benefit there did pass to the consumer, right? And so like now there's not the subsidy.
For a blip in time, for a short period of time.
For a short period of time, right? And so if you believe that it's just like a pure VC subsidy, like who loses out, right? When the subsidy isn't there.
Sure.
I think that's
a consumer angle, and like maybe it's a little different with like business to business software because like, you know, and I know some crazy engineers who like, you know, will just be like, all right, like let's move to the new thing, let's move to the new open source thing. And like open source is a way that like this kind of plays out in the B2B world. Like open source software, like, you know, there'll be a company that makes some open source thing and, you know, then they release a cloud version of it, which is like paid and managed.
Yeah, it's like hosted.
And that model has come under a lot of challenges. Like, you know, if you want to get rid of Uber as a customer, or as a consumer, like you can get rid of it. But like if you've got, you know, software and you've got processes flowing through it, like that's a lot different of a subsidy. It's a lot harder to churn.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I think like open source is fascinating to me. I don't pretend to be an expert in it because I've never been a part of nor run an open source company. I've been part of lots of freemium SaaS companies. They're like siblings to each other, but they're not exactly the same, right? Like for a company that offers a hosted version of something that's open source, the open source thing is kind of like the free product, and then their hosted version is like the paid product, right? Mm-hmm. For like a freemium SaaS company, you normally have some like limited version of your product that is free, and then there's like the full kit and caboodle or whatever you want to call it. That's like that is the paid product. At least in the SaaS world, look, there is an element of you are subsidizing users who come and adopt your free product, right? Because ultimately you got to build the product and you got to host it and support it, right? Now you could like minimize the cost of that, but like there is a cost to be borne there. If you are somewhat savvy and intelligent and you're like looking at this in business speak, you have to look at that cost as effectively cost of customer acquisition. So like, how do you analyze it and look at it? It's like, okay, how much money did we spend on our freemium product this year? How many clients do we support on our freemium product? And then how many clients do you upgrade off of the freemium product and amortize that cost? And that's the cost of the freemium product, right? And that's cost of customer acquisition. And that only makes sense when the lifetime value of that customer is higher of the sum of all of your customer acquisition, which is like the cost of the freemium product plus like literally everything else, right? Like the cost of the salesperson to upgrade that customer, the cost of the marketing, whatever it is, right? So that's the way the subsidy tactically works. Is it I don't know if you call it a subsidy or not. I mean, you could call it a subsidy, sure, right? You could call it a bribe. I've been accused of bribing people with my free product. It's like, I don't accept bribes. And I'm like, dude, I'm literally just offering you like awesome free alerting. Like, are you sure you don't want to try it out? It's like, I don't want to talk with you because you're pushy and I don't accept bribes. Like, I'm going to block you. And I'm like, okay.
Like the mafia out here, selling into certain personality types is fascinating. Like,
yeah. Well, for us too. Sorry, Lauren, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you, and then I'll respond.
Yeah, no. Like I have a friend who runs a. I'm not going to say what it is, but runs a fairly well-known data company, and he was telling me recently that like someone came in and said, and they've been around for a while. They've been around for a decade or more, and have raised a little bit of VC money originally, but have been running it at break even. Then they raised a little bit more recently, and the guy tells them like, well, I don't know if you're going to be around in the future because you just raised VC money, and the guy, says, well, I don't know, man, I'm about to tell you, we've been around for 10 years. We're not going anywhere. So, it's selling. There's a lot of, I think, silliness in selling to, certain personality types that like you don't figure out until you've like been a founder or you've been in sales or you've done stuff like that. And like, you get the pushback from people that like, all right, is this a real argument? Or, like if you don't want to talk, like we don't have to talk.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think
Funny.
when you were talking and where I was almost interrupted you was part of like our journey to where we are now also is a reflection of like our continuing to sharpen the pencil on our like customer persona, which has now become increasingly technical, more of like a data engineer. And like, look, I'll be the first one to admit, like, I'm not that person, right? So now we're a company that maybe lives within the big vision that I set when we started out, but like our product is what our customers have told it should be, right? The point being, an increasingly technical user or buyer like hates being sold to, or is much less open to being sold to than like business personas, right? And so your pricing and packaging strategy ultimately needs to reflect that, right? And like if you look at open source software, right? There's not like a lot of open source marketing software or like sales software. There's like open source engineering and like infrastructure and developer software, right? And those are folks much more likely to like, I have a problem, I'm interested in solving it, and I like to tinker, all that stuff. But like if you're trying to sell to me, like get away, right? Like I hate you.
All the for this bribery here.
Yeah. I was like, I was just like, so when I got like accused of bribing someone, like I was a little like, I'm honestly being like extremely nice, and like you're being the asshole right now. But okay,
I mean, to get the dinner, you got to get if he's doing that, at least get a dinner out of you, Nick. If you're in New York here, Nick will take you out to dinner and slide the little 100 under the table for you.
Yeah, a little hundo. I'll subsidize you to come on and try our free product, or dinner, or whatever it is.
So Nick, you guys are how many years in? 3-4 years in WorkStream?
It's like 4 years, yeah.
So what knowing what you know now about the PLG freemium strategy is what's working, what would you have done differently starting out? Or did it take sort of the learning that you had to go through to get here?
Yeah. What would I have done differently? I mean, how much time do we have? I was thinking that, like, I've thought about that question quite a bit, right? There are a million things you would do differently. One of the things that I've thought about as a part of an answer to this question, which the two of you will probably appreciate, is like, the VCs are full of shit until they're not full of shit. But like as a founder, how do you know when they're full of shit and when they're not full of shit, right? So like as an example of what I mean by this is you go out and pitch a VC, like, hey, I want you to, and Lauren speaks, subsidize my company. And you're like talking about your product vision, and a lot of times they'll be like, you need to be more focused, right? Like you need like this like hyper tiny little wedge, right, into the market. This like one thing that you do like really, really well, and it's like very, very specific. And we've kind of gotten there with our alerting product, right? Like our wedge in, or why folks are really excited about trying us, is we offer them this awesome alerting in Slack in the way exactly the data team wants. So there's value in that, but the VC doesn't like, but there's a million other examples of like companies that went the other way, where they had like a big vision, like Airtable is an example of a PLG company that was like super horizontal. From like the very beginning, and in a lot of ways they just built like a better spreadsheet, and they weren't super use case focused, right? But would we say that like the Airtable founders were like idiots for their early product strategy? Like I don't think you have any data to like prove that. So I guess my point being, like, I think if I was going to go back and do it, I would be like, I have different opinions now on what advice to listen to versus not. I do think that like being super focused early on like a specific hook is valuable, but short of a big vision, like it doesn't matter, right? Because you could, if you get a super small hook, but then it has no context of where you're maybe gonna go, and you have no opinion upon where it's gonna go, well, like you're gonna be a flash in the pan thing. I think as a guiding principle, like providing like a lot of value, before you ask for value, providing 10 times the amount of value that you ask for, like that's gotta be there, and a ton goes into that. I think as part of that, you have to find something that's like mission critical. Like you have to be solving a mission critical problem, for your user, for your client, right? And I think like maybe if I'm just like thinking out loud, like maybe the last thing is to like give less of a fuck about like what other people are doing or like what is said that you're supposed to do, and follow your like truly like follow your gut and your North Star. Because like ultimately I think if you're following like the customer and you believe that you can offer them a mission critical software that provides 10 times the amount of value that you ask for, like you're probably going to end up on something like strong and good, right? And I think the question becomes like the nuances of how you get there. And the like big fallacy of PLG is that you build something and you just like announce it, and then like all of a sudden people are coming to like your website and they're just like installing it and things go crazy. Like that's not really the way it works at all. Like you actually have to build around some people for a long period of time, really get to the bottom of what their problems and their pain points are, right? Show them 10x value, and then show the next 100 people 10x value, and then show the next 1,000 people and 10,000 people 10x value. And we obviously haven't showed 10,000 people 10x value, right? But I think that's our mindset. And so I would encourage the Nick 4 years ago to be more honest with himself about that and how you get there.
That's great. I know a lot. I mean, people tuning in, I know a lot of them are, those are the type of lessons they're here for. Yeah. Go for it, Lauren.
Yeah. So another thing here, like, and you mentioned like, kind of like, you talked about it with VCs and stuff and like hype and whatever, or like, here's the way to do things. If Canadian, right, they all fly in V's, and the first goose in the front bears all the friction or whatever, and then the geese behind that front goose in the V each get to like there's a slipstream effect, in the same way like you're in a bike race, or in the same way you're in anything, NASCAR
term. Peloton, right? That's a Peloton, right? Now we think of Peloton as a brand, but a Peloton of cyclers, right?
Yeah. But no, this is like real cyclers, like Tour de France. You're just like, there's a lot of drifting that goes on. And, I would say that like the biggest drifting here in the data world, and like, you see it, Nick, with who you sell into or some of your customers, is like, it's who raises the most money. And so like, DVT is a great example. Like they raised a ton of money, and they, they're the Canadian goose out in the front of this ecosystem. The guy, Bob Moore, who, a lot of these people work for, just wrote a book. And I think it came out this week about ecosystems. And, I'll read it at some point. I'm always very skeptical myself of ecosystems, but how much of that drifting do you think is worth it for founders? Like, I know some companies out there, modern data stack, whatever, have like, they dig into that, they just drift, and that's what they do. And they, take that second or third thing back off of it. Is that something that's worth it? Do you have the kiss the ring to do that? Like, how does drifting on, one of these like very well-funded companies work? And is it worth it?
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. As you were talking about bike races and the Peloton and like the idea of drifting in a slipstream, I couldn't help but think of like doping in cycling and how like, while the idea of an ecosystem is good, you don't want to be like the asshole like cyclist who dopes and like accepts like the VC subsidy.
Who's the doper here? DDP Lab?
Am I the doper? I don't know. Look, I think I take a bit of a different. I have a bit of a different take on ecosystems because I've spent a lot of time in tech companies that are like ecosystem companies. So like my old company, like it was, let's say, the leading company in like the Google Workspace. It was called like Google Apps, G Suite, like the Microsoft Office competitors, right? And it sold into IT admins. And that company played and provided a lot of value and made a really good business by like playing within that ecosystem, right? And so I think there's value in being part of an ecosystem, right? But I think where you got to be careful is to not let like the tail wag the dog. Like the wrong way to start a company is to be like, we're going to be the modern data stack version of X, right? I don't know, Lauren. Give me what's a modern? I don't know. There's a million of them, right? Like we're the new Alteryx.
Right.
I don't know. Like let's go pick some like product that was used like 20 years ago and it's like lives on a server farm and let's create like a modern data stack version of it, right? I don't know if that's like the right. To me, that's not necessarily the right play. I think it's okay to fit into an ecosystem, again, as long as you're like following the adage of like, or the belief that you should provide 10x customer value, right? You don't necessarily need to be the customer in order to have that insight, but like you got to get to that insight on how you're going to provide 10x value, right? Sure. And the value, to your point, of the slipstream, and the slipstream is like an easy example. And we're using the word subsidy here quite a bit, right? Is like, if you look at an ecosystem, it is one in which it has brought vendors and clients together. And so there's been a subsidy in building that. And so you can kind of plug into that. If you bake it down to the two, most challenging things as an early stage founder, it's like, how do you build a product that provides 10x value? And then ultimately, like, how do you distribute that effectively to customers, right? And data, like the modern data stack as an ecosystem can help you with both of those things. But the tail of being a modern data stack company shouldn't like wag the dog.
Sure. If anyone out there has questions for Nick or any of us, feel free to post them here. And we're happy to get to them.
We've had some great comments. Sarah McKenna, who's the CEO of Sequentium, also a tech pro, she's been on. She said, I think there was a pullback on spending in data last year because of the expense and issues with the modern data stack. She thinks that people got a lot wiser to all the underlying costs. Successful data teams still spent, but new and unproven teams have had a harder time spending and closing. I mean, we've all seen that, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's true, right? I think even the successful team, right, that is spending, how do you get in, right? I've talked to like really well founded or really well funded companies, like billion-dollar unicorn companies, like that are objectively crushing it, right? Like not like a crazy like Ponzi scheme or anything. And they're like, we have to make an argument now. Like, this is a data team that I'm talking to. Like, we have to make an argument now on. It's like we have a zero cost budgeting now. Like, I can't go make an ROI argument to the CFO. It's like, here's the number. I have like $100 to spend, and like I cannot spend $101. So if I'm going to spend something on your product, I have to spend less on something else, right? So one of the things they were doing was moving off of like well-known, I won't mention the companies, like well-known hosted products to open source to try to save cost. But how am I going to get it? Like, how do I get in there, right? Well, a good way to get in there is by saying, hey, we have an awesome free product that provides 10x value, right? Don't worry about the pricing. You can always consider buying the premium version of it later. Of course, the ulterior motive is you want to try to get somebody to buy the ulterior motive of it later. But sorry,
what about how have you
you
run into AI? Well, either using it yourself in your own product, or in even if it's not visible in your product, in your own organization, and then also with customers. Is that something that people are actively talking about, like customers, like in that you're selling quality, you're selling reassurance through a product? Is that something that you've seen pop up a lot, and how if so, how are you kind of like selling around that or positioning around that?
Yeah, I mean, we get lots of questions around it, but they're, at least for me, they're more like folks are interested to hear what you're going to say, right? It'll be like, and a lot of data people that you're talking with, I mean, if we're being like, a lot of those folks work at tech companies. I mean, not there aren't data teams all over the place, right? But there is like a massive like group of tech companies that have data people. And so they're just like interested to hear what you're going to say, because like AI is the new like sexy thing. So people will ask us about like, what's our AI play? And I'll give them an honest answer, but there's not, it kind of has been that level of like surface interest, not a, can you go do this thing? But also, I mean, at least my view is like a lot of the challenges around AI right now is this really promising technology, but like, what's the 10x like value creation use case, right? Like even ChatGPT, while you can like argue it's great, and it is great for some use cases, like Google search is actually better in some like ways, shapes, and forms. Like if I'm just looking for a restaurant within a 5-block radius, like ChatGPT isn't like the best answer to that question. So I don't know. We've had lots of questions about AI, interesting conversations about how we might leverage AI in the future. We played with some versions of AI as a potential like direction to pivot in, and we decided not to like really invest there. Our team does use AI quite a bit, like internally, mostly the engineering team, for like autocomplete types of scenarios, which is, I think, like a pretty obvious 10x use case that many smarter people than me have talked about. But at least for us, that's kind of how things have played out. Like sexy buzzword hasn't really impacted us yet.
I want to know what lessons learned you've had on the marketing side. Obviously for selfish reasons, because that's the side that I do. What can you teach me, or what can you teach? Yeah, like the founders who, whether it's when to bring in marketing, how many resources to devote to it. Obviously that ties into the PLG question as well. But
totally. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it's like we've changed our business model, and so making decisions around marketing, to some respect, needs to reflect that, right? Mm-hmm. Like in a PLG business model, like as a thought exercise, like how valuable is going to a conference? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, it seems like a lot of money to spend if you're like just trying to sign people up for free. Mm-hmm. But then on the other side, like, well, if you're an early stage company, you're just trying to generate awareness of that you exist, right? Good way to do that is to go like meet people in person.
Go stand outside the conferences like Lauren does.
yeah, exactly. Or do guerrilla stuff, right? Look, I think there's no right answer. I think the obvious things are like marketing, like anything else, has to be a reflection of like the company strategy, which in an early stage is really a reflection of like the product and the product strategy.
Yeah.
So I think for us, investments we've made in like awareness, I think those investments will bear fruit regardless of like the exact product strategy, right? Because regardless if you're like leading with sales or not, people need to be aware of you, at least at the earliest days. I think for us, especially as we've like thought more and more about getting folks to use the product. I mean, I guess top of funnel wise, we've generally had a lot of success with like video in general, as a way to like cut through the noise and show like real differentiated like value and content. Obviously, like content and stuff like that becomes increasingly valuable as like a cheap way to generate awareness, like in a world in which you're trying to get folks to adopt and like use a product, right? You okay?
Yeah.
Um,
My desk moved. Sorry, it wasn't an earthquake, folks. We're good.
Not an earthquake.
No, that's good. Yeah. So no like big lessons there, but
Yeah,
it's all about so much anyway. Marketing with SEO changing all the.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a marketing guru. That's why I work with folks like you, Mary, who can tell me what to do and what not to do.
Well, what's next, Nick? Like, what's what's next for WorkStream? Like, what are you doing in the next couple of couple of months here? You mentioned that you have kind of pivoted your what you're offering a little bit. You have different tiers now. Like, what can folks do to see what you're offering now and what your plan is for the next couple of months, 3 months, 6 months out?
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, the next year is about the number one thing we're trying to do is show as many teams as possible, like 10x value on our free Slack alerting and incident management product. And just proving to the market that, obviously like establishing that we're here, but proving to the market that like we literally like mean what we say when this is like our flagship product and it's awesome and you're gonna get a lot of value out of it. Just spend 5-10 minutes doing that, right? And a ton goes into that, right? Even today with like PLG, it starts very retail like, and then how does that turn into more of like a word of mouth thing? So all of that I think is important. Obviously evolving that product offering largely based off of what folks are telling us is like the guiding light there. So I mean, look, I think that's the first most important thing. And from there, it's launching and like tripling down on like the premium version of that offering, right? And we have folks that pay us today. We have a premium version now, but that's not like the main focus, right? The main focus is showing people the 10x value on the core product. And that's how I'm thinking about it now, right? And over the next year, how do we just win as many like clients as possible on the free? As honestly, like again, hearts and minds on the free stuff, and then start to show that yes, there's like a business to be built off of that. I don't know, at the highest level, that's kind of where we are, and we've pivoted very, very hard over the last 3-6 months to trying to like sell people a paid thing, to just trying to get folks to adopt, which has been interesting. Like I was talking to my co-founder about it, and we kind of have like broken everything in order to make that work. So I don't know. I'll keep you posted. You can have me back on in a year, and I'll tell you what the next 12 months ends up looking like.
Absolutely. This is a question for both Nick and Lauren, if you've got a couple minutes left. What any predictions for what we're going to see in whether it's the modern data stack ecosystem or tech at large in the next 6 to 12 months? big or small? I know that's a big question. So
I've been very adamant about, writing blogs and just posting on Twitter about which tech stocks are going to fail. And, MongoDB, Snowflake, GitLab, all started tanking, and they're going to keep tanking, is my prediction. So,
I want to see a Zoom added to that list. I want to see you do a deep dive on Zoom. Like not on Zoom, but about Zoom.
Yeah, about Zoom. I think there's a lot of people cover Zoom, like a lot of like financial analysts, and like I don't know, I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of hope for it. Same with DocuSign. DocuSign's a funny one because at the end of the day, it's just like PDF readers. And one of the funniest things out there is, I think they have like 6,000 employees or something, and it's like a meme on the internet about like, why does DocuSign have 6,000 employees for, putting a signature on a page and then, being a PDF reader. And so that's another one. But a lot of these, yeah, I mean, a lot of this, like I break it down into, does a company create more human middleware or does it not create more human middleware? And when I say human middleware, that's people who like either as part of their jobs or as all their jobs are just, gluing stuff together. And the companies like, I don't know, I'd put Snowflake in a bucket that creates more human middleware and like, they're not doing well and their CEO's gone and they're entering a new phase and they're pivoting to AI, whatever that means. I'm not very bullish on that. I don't think they're set up for it, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But, they're a product that does that. MongoDB is kind of one that does that. Anything that's like built around bloat is not doing well right now and going forward. And a lot of them know this. And a lot of these companies, they've gotten a little bit, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here, but they got like what's called a little bit aggressive with their accounting last year, knowing that this is going to happen. They started moving more revenue up on their contracts, doing things that, make the numbers look good now being last year, but then they have to pay for it later. So they've all, released guidances that are down pretty significantly for this year, for this upcoming year. They've been growing at 20, 30%. Now they're going to grow at only 10% is what they're guiding towards. So a lot of these, a lot of the tech world is just, kind of in this like flattening right now of these like, big names that we know. And I don't see why that's, gonna stop anytime soon. I think for people out there, like, if you've been, blank job over the last couple of years, like a lot of people are looking for jobs and they're trying to find the same job title as the job they've had the last 2 jobs, the last 3 or 4 years. I don't know, maybe you look for a different type of job. Like, your skills are transferable to a different role.
Just change your title on LinkedIn and then you'll get
just put AI on it and put the word engineer in there somewhere. And,
yeah.
Those are my predictions anyways.
Oh, it's always hard to follow up Lauren's predictions. I mean, you're just so much more of I'm a founder, so like there's some element of me that I'm like an eternal optimist, or like I try to be. I mean, in a good way, Lauren, you're like much more of a realist than I think I am, or a lot of people are. So my prediction can't just be like, I disagree and everything is going to be sunshine and rainbows, right? Look, I don't disagree. We're in like a challenging, interesting moment. I'll go like a completely different direction. Like maybe not in the next year or so, but I think in the next 5-10 years, I think we're going to get back in tech in general to working on like bigger, like more substantial problems to solve. If you look at like, I grew up in like Palo Alto, which doesn't mean anything beyond just like I grew up in Palo Alto, so I was surrounded by tech as a kid. Like the stuff that companies did was crazy. Like the technological leaps were like much bigger than just like the next like SaaS company that Lauren would say is full of shit, right? So like There's just like, is it adding like little incremental value here and there? And so I think that's going to manifest itself in like lots of different ways. AI obviously is like this sexy thing, and lots of people are saying like it's the new platform or whatever it is. But you know, it doesn't all like feed back to like Elon and like, if you look at my background, I started my career at Tesla, right? But like, I think those types of problems, you're going to see more companies chasing after that stuff, because it's not like the returns at a macro level have been that great on this like software stuff, which was supposed to be like a sure bet. So I think the dollars and honestly what folks are interested in is going to shift, right? Like, if you're going to go work at Uber or Facebook and just get laid off or whatever, and there's not like all the wage inflation anymore, wouldn't you go rather work at on a company chasing a more substantial problem that maybe is like more mission oriented or mission driven? I don't know how much of that shift will happen, but I just think we'll see more and more of that. I don't know, that's, I guess, my long-term
I'm not an
prediction.
optimist, but I do think, you know, when things are tighter, people get more creative and innovative. So we will see some sort of shift along the lines of what you're predicting. Yeah, TBD, huh? Maybe we'll get you back in 6 months. But
Whenever you want, I'm here.
yeah, I'm thrilled to see that that the pivot within Workstream is going so well. You guys are a great team, great product. This has been awesome. We had tons of people on YouTube this time. We usually don't. So thanks for making us go viral on our level on YouTube today, Nick.
I guess whatever I can do to help. It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Feel free to add comments or questions for Nick in the chat on LinkedIn or wherever else you're watching. And yeah, terrific show. Lots of good advice.
Awesome. A lot of fun. Thanks for
Take care,
having me.
everyone. Workstream.io.
Yeah. Have a great weekend, everybody. Cheers.
Bye.